take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hi, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April
And I'm
Bowden.
Virstyne Henry.
Please check out our website at truthertalk.com. You can find the Conspiracy Realist t-shirt and book Official Stories by Liam Sheff, who is going to be our guest in the next segment. We're always glad to have Liam on our show. He's a good friend. So, yeah, hey, Virstyne. What's up?
Oh, no. What's up with you? What's going down?
Hey,
Or
what's
going up.
down? It's going up. It's going down.
It's going
What's
down.
going?
It's going down is who's going, no, it should be who's going down.
Who's
Who's
going
going
down?
down? I don't, I had it in my head and then I lost my train of thought, but I was going to say who's going down. People that like to criticize you and don't take the time to listen to what you have to say. That's who's going down.
Yeah, people, I mean, we're talking a lot about this thing that happens on the social networking sites on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, where people just don't even, they put things out there and they say these really mean, hurtful, rude things because they don't have any empathy and they just kind of like want to attack people personally because they have a difference of opinion on you. And Virstyne and I, we've kind of...
We come up with a technique, right? Or method, we should say. Should we share it?
Yeah, we came up with we came up with a strategy for attacking.
Strategy, yeah, better word.
Trolls, people who attack us or attack our friends or say things that are malicious and mean. So tell them what we do.
We send them pictures of crazy animals until they stop.
Yeah, right. I know. Isn't that?
It's very simple, right?
It's a very simple technique. It's basically like, if we feel that if you come on and you're going to attack somebody personally because they do not vaccinate or they do not believe in vaccination, or just because they've done the research on it and they actually know that this is a farce and that people are getting hurt and they care about the people who are getting hurt and want to maybe put an end to this. So we're trying to expose this as, you know, please go look at the actual science on it. So what you have is this group on the social networking sites.
The different groups, yeah, but go on.
Different groups, but there's several of them, and they'll take something like that, and then they are just outright mean and malicious, and
all they do is just talk smack about people. They're not even posting science about why they believe what they believe to give an alternative point of view. It's all they do all day long. It's just make pictures and videos and memes. Attacking people. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
You know, I'm just like, really? Well, at least give me your point of view. You know, why do you? No, we're just crazy. And even the lecture that Paul Offit did, who says he's a doctor, communicating vaccine science to the public, all he did his whole lecture was talk about how crazy people that didn't vaccinate were. He didn't talk. There was no shred of science at all. Talking about why vaccines are effective and safe, which is what I expected. I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But if, you know, anyway, sorry, April, I cut you off.
Oh, no, you didn't cut me off. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, they come on and they make personal attacks. And I think we've talked about this group before. There's one out there called Jenny McCarthy's Body Count.
Oh, they're terrible.
And, I mean, they're a pro-vaccination group, but they can't stand on their own, so they have to name-call it somebody who came out and questioned their religion, which is vaccination. And so they have these religious beliefs that they call science. So it's not really science. It's a religious belief. And, you know, Liam and I, Liam, who's going to be our next guest, we did a show on his network. He has the Energy Show with Liam Sheff. He has his own radio show, and I was on the show about a week ago, and we talked about how they use they use science, what they call science, but it's actually like a religious. They use like religious sacrifices, basically. You know, so they're just kind of taking out people in a fashion that was similar to, like, I don't know, those. You know, I used a comparison to the Gardasil vaccine as when they throw the virgin into a volcano of lava. You know, you've seen the old movies where, you know, these ritual sacrifices, these tribes would, you know, sacrifice a virgin to the gods.
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of compared that because it's sort of an attempt to sacrifice, and we talked about this on our show. It's like a young woman to their gods, which is the religion, science, right? Or that's what they call it. But it's not actual science. It's not, you know, a philosophy. It's actually just, you know, whatever the big pharmaceutical companies claim, whatever they write down as their conclusion of how, you know, vaccines work or how pharmaceuticals work or how HIV testing works. And they say, this is how it works. So this is, you know, people, they're so afraid to question that doctrine that rather than questioning the doctrine, they name call anybody who does. And it's really, really gotten bad. I mean, it's gotten to the point where they just are outright mean. They use name-calling and just really horrible, horrible things. And, you know, somebody's been doing this to Liam recently, and, you know, we don't know. We'll let him decide whether or not he wants to talk about it, but we won't, you know, name any names. But we responded in such a way.
Well, we tried to be nice. You know what it was?
Yeah.
It was like, we were like, oh, this isn't what he means. Please look at this information. Please look at these videos, and then you can see where we're coming from. They're like, no, you guys are anti-science, and it's always the same anti-science rhetoric with you all the time. You guys are crazy, and you deserve to burn in hell. Okay, well, you know what? Since you're not going to listen to me, I'm just going to send you pictures of cats with guns. How about that?
Right.
You know, because basically you take the time to write to them. They're not reading what you have to say, so fuck it. Let's have fun. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. When they got mad, they're like, "Oh, this one guy was like, I'm gonna report you to the pseudoscience page." And we're like, "Oh no, don't, not the pseudoscience page, please, no, anything but that." You know?
Right.
And most of the people, they all left. They're like, you guys are just immature, and you guys are incapable of handling a real conversation. You know, just don't take them seriously, because you know what? They were not taking us seriously either. So hey, fuck it, you know?
If they're not going to do the work, and it's an insult to us and our years of work, and it's an insult to us.
Experience, our personal experience.
Our personal experience, you know, with family members and people who, you know, we're close to and we've gotten to know on our show and so on and so forth, that they don't even want to research it. You know what I'm saying?
They don't even want to listen. That's the thing. They don't even want to listen and take the time. Because even if you say, oh, I'm vaccine injured, or, oh, my friend was vaccine injured, they're like, so, you're anti-science.
Or they just want to tell you that wasn't what happened.
Yeah.
Well, you were there. You know what I mean? Like when all these people were attacking Jenny McCarthy, it was like, oh, wow, and it's amazing how many people are experts on this woman's child when probably none of them know her or him, you know, and yet they're all experts, you know, and saying that it didn't really happen, and that maybe he didn't have autism in the first place because she then recovered him from autism using a holistic approach, mostly holistic. I think she's kind of an integrative approach. But nevertheless, I mean, they tried to act like she never even, well, yeah, she didn't even recover him. She was lying the whole time. He never even had autism. And she was like, excuse me? No, I never said that, you know. But people were going around saying this, and they were spouting this out as if it was fact, even though she didn't even say that. And what I found to be really, really interesting is a lot of people in the autism community were actually on board with that. They were actually agreeing that they didn't believe that she ever said, or that she lied and said that her son never had autism. And I was like, that's interesting.
Why would she do that? But maybe they're mad because she's beautiful, or they're, you know, maybe there's some issues with, you know, I don't know, them wanting to cure their own children. And I mean, there's human beings are complex. Fuck it.
It's true, but it's,
you know.
Yes, exactly. And I think that there was a lot of haters, a lot of haters because of the fact that, like you say, she's beautiful, she's got money, she's got the ability to recover her child because of that, because she has connections and she has money to do it. And that's, let's face it, that's how she did it. She didn't have that. But, I mean, I don't hate her for that because I think anybody in that position would do the same thing. So why wouldn't you take advantage of these, if you have the ability to go to the best neurologist in the country and your son's having debilitating seizures that are almost killing him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't do it just because you'd be like, oh well, I don't want to.
It wouldn't be
take
fair.
Advantage of,
Yeah, because
it wouldn't be fair.
It wouldn't be
I don't
fair
want
to
to
the
take
poor
advantage.
people that can't do that. So I'm not gonna.
Exactly.
Basically.
I mean, and she's giving back. It's not like she's not giving back.
She's giving back, and just by sharing her experience, because how many celebrities are that honest that are going to come out in public and say, and do what she's done. So, kudos to her for doing that.
Exactly. And then, but I mean, not only that, but she runs an organization, Generation Rescue, which she works at, and she does really help people and so on. So, I mean, but people talk about her as if she's not a real person. Yeah. And they do that.
They would never have the guts to do that, say the things they're saying to her face, too. Like internet troll stuff too,
Exactly. Like the internet trolls will sit there but to have a whole website devoted to calling Jenny McCarthy's body count, to claiming that she's responsible for all these deaths across the world. I mean, that's just like satanic. That's like creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like, I mean, how would you feel if somebody did that to you? I mean, how would you feel if somebody was like, devoted a whole website, and all these people came on there and they just wanted to call you names and say that you're responsible for the death of all these children and all these people. And then on top of that, to be like, well, to never ever back down and never ever take your stance away. And even when people try to claim that you are, you stand up for yourself again and say, no, I never said that. I mean, I think she's pretty brave, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of celebrities who have vaccine-damaged children, and none of them are as vocal as she is.
Yeah.
There have been some that will come out and talk about it, but not to the extent that she has done.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was one of the reasons, or the reason that I got so upset when I wrote that essay, is because the guy that wrote the essay that I responded to was accusing anti-vaxxers for causing deaths because of the flu and shit. And that pissed me off. I took it personally,
Yeah, exactly.
And despite, and in addition to that, it was very poorly researched and just pulled together, just thrown together. How dare he?
Yeah, it's true. And these people who are attacking our friend Liam are coming out about. They're talking about the. I think this guy talks about a lot of different subjects of areas of science, and they call people like us, pseudoscientists or whatever, and
they're so ignorant.
But they were specifically coming after the film The House of Numbers, because there's a documentary. If you guys haven't seen it, if you're listening right now, you should check it out. It's called The House of Numbers, and our friend Liam was in this film. He was interviewed for it, and it's about HIV testing. It's about how this is a pretty.
There's some questions that are raised about the HIV test and the virus itself, and whether it plays a part in AIDS, what do you call it, in creating AIDS, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing is, I just want to say it's a lot of people that question this are called AIDS denialists, and first of all, that's very interesting because nobody takes the time to listen to what the other side of the argument is. And people aren't AIDS denialists. They're not saying that AIDS doesn't exist. They're just questioning what causes AIDS, and what they think causes AIDS is not what we've been told.
Exactly.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. And the thing is, I think that this information, how long has it been around? Since at least the mid-90s? At least, right? Maybe even before that? But it's been suppressed. It's not like it just came out. But there are quite a few doctors and even a Nobel laureate who's come out and questioned the original theories of Gallo and Montagnier.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just interesting that it's being suppressed. And if that's, real science is evolving and changing. How are you going to find a cure for something if you can't look at different perspectives and different ways for finding a cure? If you're always set on one way, then and you're not having success, why are you doing the same thing over and over again? That's insanity, right? You're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah, it has been known. I think Gary Null did a documentary probably in the early to mid 90s. I can't remember what it was called, but it was I want to say it was like AIDS Inc. or something like that. And and he exposed that, and he interviewed a number of people, including he was a Nobel laureate who invented what they commonly use in labs to test for viruses.
Terry Mullis.
Okay, so that's it. Yeah, so he interviewed him, and he said that, he spent a good 5 years trying to find the information that showed that the HIV testing, that HIV actually was the cause of AIDS, and there was no documentation. He couldn't find anything. And he was like, well, how can you, they're using my test to say that they're locating HIV, but I can't really find it. And so it was very interesting, and I think that there's a big question as to whether or not HIV has anything to do with AIDS. And when you're talking about the population in Africa, the people in Africa have been dying from the same diseases for quite a long time. Probably the last 100 years. Yeah. And all of a sudden they're like, well, it's this sex virus. Well, really? Because it really looks to me like it's the same thing that has always been, which is starvation
and water contamination and shit, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't have plumbing systems. They don't have, and we in the West have really prevented progress in some of these nations because, saying, oh, well, we can't, let them build and we can't let them do things because of global warming. It's weird how all these things how all these things are connected in, but that's been a lot of the reason is based on, well, we don't want them to increase the carbon, but yet meanwhile,
Ted Turner has 5 kids and he has a shitload of land in Buffalo, along with James Cameron that
Well, in this country, we're continuing to use energy. We're continuing to, just consume it as if there's no tomorrow, as if it's not a finite resource, as if oil isn't a finite resource. And yet, but we're preventing it in other countries. And I don't know. I think Africa has more resources than any other continent in the entire world. And so I think that there's a possible that we just want to be able to take their resources for ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, therefore we are not allowing them to progress and to have these things that we take for granted, sanitation and clean water in this country. And so then they say, okay, well, what about, the big AIDS epidemic amongst the gay population in this country? Well, we never saw a big lesbian outbreak. We never saw a big, but we did in amongst gay males. And, I think that when originally, if you look at these films, this isn't to offend anybody, but if you watch these films, they suggest that, when originally this, there were a lot of folks who were coming down with, venereal diseases and coming down with all kinds of illnesses, and they were having to use large amounts of antibiotics and so on and so forth. It was recognized that it was the swinging 70s, and this was part of the gay lifestyle. And they went to clubs, and there was a drug called a popper, and this caused everybody to have the big high, and it also caused, a higher sensation, during the sexual act and so on and so forth. And
they were doing this like every night, every weekend, all the time, not just like once or twice. Because I know that the people that might be listening, they're like, oh, I've done poppers, and no, but they were doing it to the point that it was like wrecking their gut flora and their immune system. And that's what depletes your, that's what they say HIV does, right? It says that the HIV virus supposedly goes and attacks your T cells and your immune system, and then you don't have any immunity, right?
Right.
So it's like if your immune system is messed up, whether it's from a virus or T cells, it doesn't have to be from a virus. It can be from other things.
Exactly. Right, exactly.
Plus you can't, I'm sorry, I just want to say this too. One thing that surprised me, I thought until I start researching this, that you can, basically when a person gets a test, they take your blood out and they put it under a microscope, and then you can see the HIV virus running around. Mm-hmm. But the way that they test for it, no, that's not what happens. Right? You can't see the virus. They have to test with other factors, and it's not by looking under a microscope and seeing if the virus is actually in your blood. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, the tests that they use are shady. It's shady.
Well, because they have, I think it's like, I want to say it's like 9 different proteins they have to identify. Mm-hmm. And 2 of those proteins are normally naturally occurring in everyone.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these other proteins can be present at a specific time when you're exposed to certain things. Like, one of the things that our friend Lamb brings up is the fact that you can test positive for HIV if you've milked a cow. So there's a protein that's present in milk that will cause you to have an HIV diagnosis.
Or the flu, or the stress of having an HIV test too, right? That can bring up one of these proteins, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And a flu shot, there's all kinds of ways that you can be exposed to these proteins. And a lot of times, what they do in this country is they factor in your race, they factor in your sex, if you go in for an HIV test, most of the time they'll ask you a series of questions. And well, why are they asking a question if it's just obvious? If it's just right there on the virus, why do they have to ask you anything?
Yeah.
But they do.
Because if you get cancer, you have cancer no matter what your race or your sexual orientation is, or your back,
Or diabetes.
Yeah.
You're going to have high blood sugar. It's going to show that you're not able to convert sugar into glucose. And that's it. Boom. That's it. You have diabetes. You can't convert sugar into glucose. But if you have HIV, they want to know your race, they want to know your sexual orientation, they want to know how many partners you had, they want to know all these things. Why? Because that will help them determine whether or not you're HIV positive or not. So it's not just a plain virus. And a lot of people in the truth movement, I think that the HIV virus was planted here by the government. But it's really not that sexy, and it's not that complicated. It's really just a fraudulent test.
Well, I can see, though, how it's been manipulated by the government, by Big Pharma, because there are also 2 people that won't look into other perspectives of this paradigm because, they have guilt about being sexually promiscuous. They know that, people that are, if you're hiding, a lot of people, they know they're like, they might have some guilt, and they think they might deserve it. So on a psychological, basis, then, they accept it,
Yeah, sure.
And they know that. And they're suppressing the information too, because the doctors that have come out and have tried to give their opinion or their take on it have been have been physically attacked, and their careers have been attacked. They've been, their character has been assassinated. But what makes me upset is the fact that if you're so for science and you believe in science so much, why do you only listen to one side of a story? Science is supposed to be about people bringing their experiences and their interpretations together. I think people just have this thing with science where they think that if there's one theory and it's popular, then it's set in stone, and there's no room for anything else.
Yeah,
but that's not science. Mm-mm. That's just. I mean, we used to believe that we didn't know that washing our hands were played a huge part in hygiene. I was listening to this lady. There was this book on Europe, and I'm not saying it's just Europe, maybe, but basically she was focusing on Europe. So she was saying, they would go for weeks and weeks and weeks without bathing, and they would take public baths together. And, you know, and we're like, ew, that's gross. Now we're like, oh, that's so nasty. But at the time, they didn't know better, you know? And now, you know, they've discovered that maybe that isn't the best thing. And now that it's even gone to the reverse, now people are cleaning up too much, too. So then people are too clean. So we have to go to the other extreme to realize that, okay, well, we're cleaning good bacteria because there are some bacteria that are beneficial for us. So we got to go back. So we got to find that balance, you know. Exactly. But like cancer and AIDS and all of these money-making diseases, basically, if people bring up different theories, it's like you might as well just put a gun to your head, you know. Yeah, exactly. It's terrible. But I think the fact that the information is being suppressed should raise some questions. Because the people that are talking about this, their intentions are to find a cure for AIDS. If you're being led down the wrong path to find a cure for AIDS, then, you know, you're not going to find the cure for AIDS. So it's just, I don't know.
Well, doesn't everybody wonder, like, how come there's no cures for anything ever? You know, I mean, don't you ever wonder, like, why is it that, you know, we've been searching for a cure for cancer, and we've been searching for a cure for AIDS, and then there's just never anything ever. You know, they don't cure it. You know, if they might come up with a vaccine for it, but it doesn't cure it. You know, it doesn't. They say that they maybe can prevent it, but they, you know, I don't know. In these AIDS drugs, and one of the other things that that they talk about in these films, House of Numbers, and then the other one I mentioned, by Gary Knoll, but the one specifically that this guy is going after is the House of Numbers. And he says, but one thing that's discussed is the fact that a lot of these people who get a diagnosis of HIV die because they get put on these horrible black box drugs. Yeah. And they're called black box drugs because they're so toxic that it's illegal to flush them down the toilet. But what happened to a lot of these gay men at this time in the 70s and in the early 80s was that because of the lifestyle, because they were going to these clubs in New York, and it was happening primarily in the big cities. It was happening in L.A., it was happening in New York, it was happening in San Francisco. And they were going to these clubs, and they were, you know, having a lot of sex, and they were doing drugs, and they had a decadent lifestyle. And they were getting put on antibiotics, and the series of antibiotics, there was an antibiotic shortage in some of these cities because of how many guys were coming in and needing to have antibiotics. So what they did was they created a super antibiotic, which was essentially chemotherapy. And so a lot of these guys would get sick after taking these drugs, and then they called it a virus. But really, you know, I mean, who's questioning the pharmaceutical companies in causing these problems, in causing these things with these people, and making them sicker than when they came in? You know, they come in and they have a venereal disease, and then they come out and they're dying. It's like, you know, they come in the pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of these people died because they were given AZT. AZT was a deadly, deadly, deadly drug, and it killed a lot of people.
They also didn't know that at that time the gut flora was in the stomach too. I mean, not the gut flora, the flora in the stomach played a huge part in immunity too.
Right.
So.
Yeah, there was a lot of misconceptions as to what was considered good health and so on and so forth. So, but my point about the government wasn't to say that the government is complacent and that they didn't do anything wrong. It was just to say that there isn't any. If you're out there looking for this story about a monkey out in the Congo, you know, that spread some deadly virus or whatever, it didn't happen like that. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't some virus that was injected in people and so on and so forth. It's just a fake test. It doesn't exist. And, you know, where the government is perpetrating this is because, you know, they're playing along with it. You know, they're continuing to sink money into it. They're continuing
and they're
to
suppressing information.
Make money off of it. They continue to suppress information on it. You know, they make a lot of money. The government makes money if somebody comes in for an HIV test. The more people that test positive, the more money that they actually receive. It's a source of income for the states and for the counties and so forth and so on, because they get paid by the federal government for having each number of person that comes in with a positive diagnosis. So, you know, and it's like this for a lot of things. You know, as my son has autism, same thing with that. You know, the more diagnosis they get, the more money they receive. So these clinics and these organizations that perform treatments and whatnot. So there's an incentive to increase the diagnoses. And so if you look into it, I think you'll find that, I don't necessarily buy into this idea that there was some virus that was, leaked out. And there was an experiment that was done in the, I want to say late 70s, maybe early 80s, right around the time of the big AIDS boom. In New York, there was a group of men. They were solicited for being gay and promiscuous. That was literally what they put in the newspaper. We want gay, promiscuous men. We want gay, promiscuous men to come in and test a hepatitis B vaccine. And hepatitis B is a sexually transmitted disease. So we want you to come in and test for this, do the vaccine. And a large number of these guys got sick and later would come down with what would be called an HIV diagnosis. So some people will take that and say, well, they injected them with something. Yeah, with a vaccine.
Yeah.
The vaccines are all toxic. It doesn't matter. And do we know the number of people that got sick? Were they in the control group or were they in the placebo group? We don't really know. We just know that the people that went in for this test or, to this trial to try this vaccine for the pharmaceutical company got sick. We know a lot of those people got sick and later that would be diagnosed with HIV. So were they injected with something? Yes, they were. They were injected probably with formaldehyde and mercury and, any number of
monkey balls and fetal tissue and, yeah.
Exactly. And as we've talked about time and time again on the show, when they perform these tests, when they perform these studies, the pharmaceutical companies give the people in the placebo group the same toxins. The only thing they take out is the virus itself. So that's why a lot of times what they have is the same number of people getting sick on either side. And they go, well, you see, that proves that the vaccine is safe because it must have been another variable, outside of it. But no, it doesn't prove that. It just proves that you gave them the exact same thing. It proves that it's not a true control group. So it's not a true safety test. So, were they injected with something, viral? I doubt it. I think it's more along the lines of just the vaccine itself is toxic. And the movie The House of Numbers really does a good job explaining this. So we encourage everybody to go check it out and do your own research on it and not just take our word for it and certainly not listen to these douchebags who go around claiming science, Yeah.
Science told them to do that and this and, yeah.
It's like the devil
yeah,
told me
totally,
to do
yeah.
it,
It's like, so... Especially, I went on. I remember I was researching, and I came across this YouTube page with this guy who has HIV, or said he was diagnosed with HIV, and there were people that were on his page saying, "Oh, you don't have HIV, silly. HIV doesn't exist," and he was getting so infuriated with them. And I don't blame them, even though I agree with what they were trying to tell him. I don't blame him for being upset because how they were approaching him.
Right, exactly.
Because they weren't being sensitive to his plight. Because in his mind, from his paradigm, his perspective, he has HIV. So, some people that's coming up to him telling him he doesn't have HIV, it seems crazy. I could see where it would seem crazy to him, even though they're trying to help him, but they were just very insensitive the way that they were approaching him. So I don't know, I have this fight with a couple, actually just one friend that's really, really reluctant to look at the information. He's not HIV positive, but I think that's where it just frustrates me because you're trying to give them information to broaden their perspective and empower them. And I think it's very actually empowering to know, extremely empowering, to understand this. Because honestly, I think that's where the cure for AIDS lies, is when you treat it. That's how, he doesn't go into the science breakdown, but that's how, have you heard of Dr. Sebi? Dr. Sebi is a herbalist from Barbados, and he's the guy that cured Magic Johnson. I don't know if Magic Johnson I've heard people say that he's cured. I don't know how much he's willing to talk about it. I've heard him say that he looks very, very healthy. He doesn't look sick. How long has it
Right.
been?
He doesn't. It's
Dr.
25
Dr.
years.
Sabi says he cures AIDS, and that was the guy that worked with Magic Johnson. So, I don't know though. I mean, you know too how this business works when people come out and talk with, has he been paid not to talk? Was he threatened if he were to talk in detail? Because I think if he were to come out and say something about that, he would probably get harassed if he were to be too vocal about it. Dr. Sabi goes and has lectures and stuff. His name is Sebi, but I don't think people take him seriously because he's not a doctor, that bullshit. But it's so funny. I was looking at a Quackwatch one time, the guy that runs Quackwatch, and he's a doctor. He's a psychiatrist, or I think he's a psychiatrist. He has all these awards and medals, right? And I'm thinking, it's very interesting that he has all these awards and certificates and medals and stuff, but he hasn't cured one person of cancer or AIDS or diabetes. And I know personally people that have personally been cured of those things. So
Right.
I don't really give a fuck where you went to school. I give a fuck about who you've cured or if you can cure me. But it's sad that there are people that are going to be so close-minded as to not even listen to somebody because they are brainwashed to think that in order for you to be important or relevant, you have to have a degree, or some kind of certificate. Now I know better. I know that doesn't mean shit. It really doesn't.
Exactly.
People have to kind of look at the information and make up their own minds. But it's so sad. I feel sorry for the people that are closed-minded because they're pushing so much away,
Right.
by being like that.
Yeah, it's true. And they're really, like you brought up the empowerment, they're really disempowering themselves because I find it so empowering to know that the HIV test is fraud because it's like I can't remember how many years of living in fear, not understanding that. Like, oh, wow, you could just go out and you'd have sex with somebody and then you could catch this disease that will kill you. And then like you said, you mentioned before, like, and then having sex and then having that level of guilt about it, like, oh my God, I shouldn't have, I should have been more careful and da-da-da-da-da and all this and that and all this shame attached to it, which is just wrong. It's just, and then when you find out that it's just not even true, it should make you feel good. It should make you go, you know what, wow, good. Because now, there is no deadly virus. Great. Awesome. But people, they want to hold on to it. They don't want to believe it, They want to go to this Quackwatch guy. He's never cured anybody. Hell no. I'd be like, I want to know who you've cured,
It's so funny because, Dr. McCullough has a really, a nice, pretty healthy history of healing people or, helping people manage their illness or just cure them completely. And I told somebody about them when their girlfriend got cancer, and they put in his name, and I think Quackwatch was the first to come up, and then with Dr. McCullough, right? So Dr. McCullough, Quackwatch says Dr. McCullough's a fraud. Well, you know what? I would look into Dr. McCullough, but Quackwatch says he's a fraud, so he's a fraud. I'm like, you don't even know. I just handed you a gold mine. You have no idea what you just did. Okay, quack, quack, whatever.
Yeah, it's
but
funny.
yet he's cured people.
Right, and no one's died.
No one's died, like...
And who's this guy, this Quackwatch guy? How many people has he killed? How many people have been in... I'm not saying he's killed them directly. Pardon me if he's listening. But, how many people have died in his care? So let's just put that out there. But anyway, so we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking to our very good friend, Liam Sheff, so please stay tuned.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we'd definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthertees.com. I gotta think of the middle eight. Shop.truthertees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthertees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh. gear.
Hey, welcome back to Truth or Talk. We are talking to our good friend, Liam Chef. Lankashank is back on our show today, the conspiracy realist himself, the inspiration for our t-shirt, which you can find at our website, truthertalk.com. We also have his books, official stories. You buy 3 shirts, you get a free book. So, Virstyne, we were just talking before the show. We were just having a little conversation. Virstyne was telling us something really interesting. So we're going to start the show. I'm going to throw it to you, Virstyne. Why don't you give us some... Just tell us, repeat what you were just talking about.
So we were just talking about, I was having a debate with some good friends of mine, and we agree on most issues. And he was talking about music and how he feels that people should forgo music for a year. He goes, if everybody were quit like something like music and focus on protesting or going after these, certain legislation, that, we would get more accomplished, because he feels that music distracts people. Which, and, I do agree with him to a certain extent, that certain arts can, and sports and stuff, you can lose track. You can use, it could be compared to a drug, as, where it gets people off focus. But at the same time, I was saying, there's no way in hell I'm giving up music, because that's the only thing that keeps me from slitting my wrist. Right. Because it gets all of the stuff that we're dealing with gets very heavy at times. Yeah. So you do need some kind of, dare I say escape, I would say maybe more spiritual empowerment. Because if the globalists have this world the way that they're planning for it to become, there's not going to be music. There's not going to be art. There's not going to be any of that. And that's the thing I think that makes us human, is our ability to create, and to create those things, One of the things, maybe there's I'm sure there are other elements, but one of the main things is, art and comedy, and, some of these crazy people that come after you that just want to harass you and not really trying to understand you, because they're ignorant and they're happy with being ignorant, and they're bullies, people that dish stuff out and they can't take it. But when you defend yourself, you're like, oh, what did you do? Why are you being so mean to me? Right. Yeah. And it's even worse with Facebook, in a sense, because these people that attack you will never come up to your face. They'll never come up to your face and tell it to you in your face. They're too chicken shit.
Louis C.K., who said that all this stuff, these devices take away our ability to use empathy, or they don't teach you empathy, because you don't have to deal with a person's reaction. So that's where it gets into, you won't say things to people's faces, but you'll say it to them through text, or you'll say it through Facebook or something, because you don't have to deal with that other side of it. So what about you, Lanky Skank? What do you think about all that?
It takes away empathy, all right. And I'm finding that thing right now, because I just think it's too good. And it was on the Conan O'Brien show, and I don't like Conan O'Brien very much.
Right.
I just don't really know. I never really understand. I think he's a very clever writer. I just never really understand. He seems so afraid to be political. I sometimes, you want a guy to have a point of view. Right. So I sometimes never get it. So I was impressed that, this interview, and I haven't watched his new show, so maybe he's changed. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But Louis C.K. sat there and he talked about not letting his kids have a cell phone because it turns them into horrible people.
Right.
He was really clear about that. He's like, no way. You can't do it. I don't care if all the other kids are, and he uses his comedy, I don't care if they're all freaking retarded. I'm not letting you become that. I'm not letting you, use words that aren't real. And he pointed out that people practice being mean. On the internet. And I've been attacked in the last week or so because I know that scientists lie and science generally lies. And by lies, I mean that it serves a petrochemical, petroleum god. All science, everything that we think that is our birthright is all made out of petroleum. You just walk around and try to figure out what isn't running on, built from, brought to you by, fabricated with, and from petrol. It's all petroleum oil. So science isn't really a noble philosophy of sharing ideas. It's just a way to manipulate petroleum. That's all it is. And when you point this out to people, they're kind of at a loss. Like, wow, what if that's true? Shoot, what do we do? I don't know what we do. What could we possibly do? You know,
Right.
How would we live without it? How would we live with less of it? Never mind without. How would we even live with less? Nobody, nobody knows.
Well, we did live with less of it at one point, and then incrementally we've just increased it. You know, it was like in the 1970s, Jimmy Carter came out and said, well, we're having an energy crisis. We need to reduce our use of energy or reduce our use of fuel. And then he left, or he got, booted out. And then Reagan came in and said, don't worry about what that guy just said. Just do as much as you want. Consume as much as you want. And then we've just said nothing but increase it. Increase our use of oil, increase our use of everything. We're getting involved in all of these foreign skirmishes that have nothing to do with us here in the United States, all because we're chasing oil, we're chasing energy, we're chasing the natural, now it's the natural gas. We're going everywhere to try and frack. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's what we are here in the United States in the last 2 centuries, and so you're right. I mean, it's all because all these science, as we talked about, Liam, we talked about on your show yesterday, how scientists lie, and they're always and they're slaves just as the rest of us are to this petrochemical, and I guess now it's the new thing is the natural gas. But whatever. I mean, we're always chasing the same thing. It's always we're just chasing a quick source of energy.
Well, we can't do anything else, and there's nothing anybody can really do about it except, I think, permaculture. You know, when the sugar hits the fan.
What do you think you are, Liam? Come on, you can say it.
When the diarrhea.
You're home. You're home.
When the diarrhea, when the hot, stinging diarrhea jetting out of the backside of Louis C.K. hits the quickly spinning fan and flies all over all of us, including Miles Power Incorporated, we're all going to look at each other and go, shit, there's your word. Weren't people telling us about this? They were telling us this was going to happen. They were telling us oil was going to get up to about $200 a barrel and that gas would be about $8 a gallon. They were telling us this, and now it's happening. And the government still wants us to worry about whatever the new H is. You know, they'll wear out HIV and HPV, and they'll come up with a new one. You know, and that'll occur on the bottoms of the feet of 5-year-olds, and so you'll have to inject all 5-year-olds against the bottom of the feet, H virus, whatever it is. And they'll drag people through all the mud who say that I'm not sure the science is all there. Well, you know, Science is interpretation of data, and scientists lie. The same way that doctors lie, the same way that lawyers lie. If good lawyers know the system doesn't make a lot of sense, good accountants know. Good accountants know that the tax system is totally insane, illogical, and probably illegal. And good accountants say, well, that's the system, and you have to learn how to play the game. And we all know that. It's the same in the sciences. There's a system, and if you want to be successful in the capitalist market, you have to play the game. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's a common, because I honestly wasn't really aware of this until I start researching things for myself, but people think just because a scientist says it that he speaks for all scientists and all scientists agree on the same thing. You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like they're not aware that there's dissent and there are differing opinions in the scientific community. So if you bring up an opinion that's not one that they've heard before, they automatically want to say that you're anti-science or that's not science because they're unaware of it, because they're ignorant. You know?
Mm-hmm. Right, but what are they saying when they call you anti-science? They just mean you're not agreeing
with them.
What the science.
Yeah, you're not agreeing with them, basically.
Or you're not agreeing with what the pharmaceutical funded study said, you know, or the pharmaceutical study scientists. I mean, in their labs, they're all being funded by the same companies that stand to gain from their findings, right? Yeah. So you're saying, well, I kind of find that to be unethical, but those are the only people who ever fund these studies are the ones who actually stand to gain from it financially. So that's a little weird. So why are they motivated to to disagree with what, whoever it is the pharmaceutical company wants them to find, right? Why would they be motivated to actually find the truth? And what happens, though, a lot of times is that they do. As Liam and I were talking on the show yesterday, is that they actually will, in their research, find that these things are harmful or that they're unsafe or that these tests don't work, but yet their final conclusion is whatever the abstract was, whatever they were trying to look for in the first place, even though their research doesn't support that. So how is that scientific? It's not. It just means that I don't know, you're not, basically they're not doing the research, these people who will sit there and call you anti-science. They're only saying that because they don't actually know what the research is.
It's like their vocabulary is so limited, they don't have any other word to describe what they're experiencing, It's like, I was joking with April, it's like they have their own language, right? It's like they say anti-science, that means, that they're ignorant. They say, your research isn't valid, that means I don't understand, basically. So it's very frustrating.
It's very mean-spirited. These groups are very, going back to the empathy thing, they're very, I don't know that without this type of technology we would have, where they are absent of the other forms of communication, the nonverbal communication, where you can see a person's reaction and feel how they're responding to what you're saying. But because everything is verbal on the computer and on these cell phones and the texting and all of that, they don't get those other aspects of communication. So I don't know that any of that, these mean-spirited websites like Jenny McCarthy's Body Count and shit like that would even exist. Things like that would even, obviously the website wouldn't exist, but would they have actual groups and meetings where people would come together and say those kinds of things about her? I doubt it. Sure, there's always been kind of hate groups and things like that are like that, but these really violently rude anti-vaccine groups, or that attack people like us, natural health or things like that. Like I was telling you, I think I may have told both of you guys about this group I came across. Someone had sent me a request on Facebook to join a group that was a pro-vaccine, but they're a pro-vaccine group, but they don't ever talk about vaccine science. They only attack individuals personally and their groups. So, and then they have file after file after file, several different files of groups that are that tell the truth about vaccines. Vax Truth, which is Marcella Piper Terry's group. She's on there, and the other Vax Truth with Jeffrey Othdumer, his last name, and all these people, InfoWars, Natural News, everybody's on there. And they have them categorized, conspiracy group, natural health group, and they take screenshots of your posts on Facebook, and they post them, and just to mock you, just to say, look how stupid this person is.
Yeah,
that's all they do.
They're not even trying to understand where we're coming from, or they're not even trying to look into what we're saying. Like, they're not even bothering. Where is this coming from? Are people where we've stopped trying to listen to each other anymore? That's the thing. Because we're not, honestly, we defend ourselves. We're not going, they're wrong as fucking 10 left feet with their science and stuff, but we're not going and harassing them. We're not making pages, making fun of them. Where our time is better spent actually researching things and trying to help people. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, am I trying to help people? I don't care. I suppose I don't care if people take these drugs, and I don't care if they take the test if they really want to. I just figured it was, sort of public duty to let it be known that you should read the package inserts.
Well, but you are trying to help. You're trying to help people that are open to the information, right? Because they don't know. You don't think so?
I'm trying to help them.
You're.
Well, maybe it's just a language question. I think I'm curious about what is true, so I mostly serving my own interest to figure out what is true, to figure out how the world works. So I'm not. What is it? Somebody who's going out of his way to help I'm not on a Christian mission, as far as I know, to make the world a better place. I'm curious about how the world works. I'm curious about how the Middle Ages translated into modernity. I'm curious about what the human species is. That's really it. And I happen to be built in such a intellectual way that I like to share what I find out. And that's it. I don't...
But then why are you sharing?
Because it's just who I am. I mean, we're just born under the sign we're born on, and some people are quiet sharers, and some people are communicators, and some people are teachers, and I don't assign a moral value to it. I'm just curious. You know,
but you're also very empathetic, because you do take on, because I've known you for a long time, and we're very close, very good friends, and I know that you're very empathetic to my situation with the vaccine damaged son, and to other people in my situation, and you take it on very personally, and maybe you're not on a crusade to help, but you definitely have a level of understanding that not a lot of people possess. That's kind of rare in this time. Or
empathy.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. You have empathy and understanding and definitely sympathy for those of us who have been hurt, and and it takes a certain type. I would say maybe it is a curiosity, but also a level of empathy. Because can you imagine, these people who attack me when I sit there and talk about, the pain I've gone through with my vaccine damaged son, and how, it hurts, and I would give my life, and then they sit there and they say, you're a liar, or but that didn't really happen. People talk to me like that, Liam. You know that.
Yeah.
And
I know.
But you wouldn't do that. You don't do that to people, because someone who has any kind of sympathy. Well, someone who has any kind of sympathy wouldn't do that, even if you don't agree with what with the whole vaccine side of it. You wouldn't attack a mother who says, I'm hurting. But some people do.
Yeah.
And are they sociopaths, or are they just so detached?
Well, they're more interested in being right. They have a myriad of issues going on. They're interested in being right. They want to be comfortable, because for them to admit that they're wrong would have to shift their paradigm completely, and that would make them uncomfortable, and they don't want that. A lot of people have sacrificed their lives getting numerous amounts of PhD, or basically, have sacrificed their social lives. I would say maybe going to school and getting all these degrees that they think is important to make them feel important and to make other people think that they're important. But then when you come along with some information that they're not aware of, it kind of totally shatters everything, and they can't handle that. Yeah. How dare you talk that way to me? I'm a doctor. I have a PhD. I had a friend that was just she has a PhD in political science. She's one of the most ignorant people about politics, ironically, that I've ever met. Unwilling to listen to anybody else because she has a PhD and she has all the right answers, to the point where you disagree with her, she'll throw a temper tantrum and start shaking and crying and throwing stuff. Yet she's a grown woman.
Ew.
All you have to say is, I don't agree with that. Or why do you think that? She'll go ballistic. We're not friends anymore. We're not friends anymore for that reason specifically, but there are people that just don't invite other points of view into their space because they just think that I don't know, man. I think it's kind of fascinating. I've been faced with this question really deeply within the past few months. What is it? Mm-hmm. I still think, I don't know, maybe you're not trying to help people, but what is it about you wanting to share the information? Because you can be like, oh, damn, that sucks, suckers, and just keep it to yourself. You know, you can be like, I know. I'm not getting vaccinated. You know what I mean? What is it? I'm just,
okay,
you don't
so
have to tell me.
Let's say I'm empathic with, let's say that I believe in informed consent. I simply believe that, you have a right to know what your options are, what the limitations of a process are. So, just that. But I am very curious, and I happen to like to share what I learn. I guess, like anybody, I don't really like it as, somebody's just lying to everyone. It sort of bugs me. HIV tests are a lie, for example. They'll tell you that they don't have standards. HPV shots are a lie. They'll tell you that they're not stopping any particular thing, and if I don't know, I suppose they're just puzzles. You just end up being fascinated. Well, how did that happen? Wow, this test doesn't seem to work. So why do people believe it? Oh, people believe it. So why do they believe it? Okay, why did they believe it? Because it served a cultural purpose. Because there were sick people. Because all right. So how does that work? So the mainstream ties real sickness with fake tests and makes diagnoses that don't really make sense. It's just interesting. It's like a big, I mean, why do historians study stuff and then teach it? Are they trying to help people, or are they just historians? Maybe they're just curious. Maybe we have an affinity for knowing what's happening. Maybe we're just very, very curious about what's true. I happen to be empathic with people's pain. So if somebody's having pain caused to them, I don't have to understand an issue entirely to know that if somebody's saying stop, you're hurting me, stop, you have to go, wait a second, there seems to be something happening here. We should take a look at that. Well, these mothers are saying that, and why don't we just listen to them? Why don't we just pause? Why don't we just pause for a moment and listen to them? That seems reasonable to me. That's kind of my insides.
But that is helpful, because it does hurt when people aren't listening to you, or they just ignore what you're trying to tell them. And I think in a lot of our cases, I mean, some people might be out there to tell your story to help, but a lot of times what you're really doing is you're helping yourself, because it hurts when you see other people go through it, knowing that it could have been prevented. And do I say that because I'm trying to help others, or is it just because it hurts me when I see them go through it? I think a lot of times it's sort of self-preservation. I'm looking to tell other people what happened to my son, just because, I think there's a human need to just tell your story in a way and to try and be understood. You just kind of feel that need. But then also, I would like other people to not have to go through it. I'd like to see, sort of a reduction in these vaccine injuries, because at one point, we're all going to be dealing with it as a society, as a community. It's going to be huge. I mean, it already is. But when these kids become adults, it's going to be a problem that we won't be able to ignore. And so, because the parents will start to get older and they won't be able to take care of their kids anymore, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a self-preservation as well, and thinking of my children's future and all of that, So, but what is it about us? I mean, the curiosity, I think, is a huge part of it, and also maybe a certain sort of confidence, because you have to be willing to sort of admit that maybe you didn't understand everything at one point. Yeah. So I see a lot of these people seem very insecure to me.
Yeah. Extremely. It's like high school. It's like the popular clique in I guess whatever clique, in high school that just sits back and makes fun of people, all day long. Even when I was in Taiwan, I think I told you about this, April, but I had a teacher that I work with who had trouble with I don't know, what's it called, space recognition? So if he wanted to talk to you, he would get within an inch of your face and talk to you. Well, and not in a confrontational way. He'd be like, something like, where are the markers, right? He'd get within an inch of your face to ask you that. And then people were making fun of him. And then when I was talking to you, it kind of hit me. I was like, oh yeah, he might be autistic, high functioning autistic, but he's high function, autistic. So then I was at a party and they were sitting back and making fun of him, and I was like, well, you know what? It sounds like he might be autistic. And they all just literally stopped and looked at me I was crazy, and then just went back into making fun of him. Why wouldn't they take the time to try and understand? And he was a nice guy, really handsome, really nice, really good teacher, just a cool human being. But they didn't want to take the time to understand where he was coming from. And, if he was obviously handicapped, they probably would have been nice to him, but only for the purposes of not looking like an asshole. They can be an asshole as long as they don't look like an asshole,
Well, they're very uncomfortable. If you're right and he is autistic, then they would have to feel bad for making fun of him. But then if he's just, awkward and kind of geeky, then they can make fun of him and not feel bad about it. You know what I mean? So you're challenging you're challenging them in a way so that they're going to feel like a good person or a bad person. So then you're a bad person. So it's, the people who attack me, you're a bad person if I'm telling the truth and you're attacking me. Yeah. But if you can try and say that I'm wrong, then maybe I'm making it up because I have something to gain from it, apparently, obviously. You know, my tens of dollars that I get from selling a T-shirt every year.
Oh my God,
you know,
it's too much.
my ones of dollars that I'm earning from telling my story. Not even that I'm being generous to myself by saying that. But anyway,
I know.
The point is that, you know, you challenge them because then they would have to feel bad. They would feel guilty knowing that they were making fun of an autistic child or autistic person. You know what I mean?
But in the end, it's like, what's wrong would be like, oh snap, I was wrong, and now I can understand you. We can work together better. We can work together better. Yeah. Because I understand where you're coming from. I can learn something. This is very interesting, but people are just very.
Well, it's where it takes a certain level of security within yourself to be able to say that you're wrong and that you don't know everything and that you have the interest and the curiosity to learn things that you don't know already. You can admit that. I don't understand. Can you please explain that to me? Or I don't get it. I'm gonna go look into that and see. Maybe I was wrong. You know, that takes a self-confidence, I think, because these people they get so angry that you challenge them because they're not secure enough in themselves to actually look into it because maybe they're wrong.
Yeah. And it's also too, why do people need to go around debunking things? Because it's like, you can put your point of view up and realize that somebody has another point of view. But why do you feel like you need to debunk something? You know what I mean? Because you're just we're bringing up like a vaccines. We're saying this is what happens to us, but we're not going around attacking people who are pro-vaccine, feeling the need to debunk them.
Right.
So what is wrong with that? What does that say? Like, I look at Quackwatch. I was looking at Quackwatch today, and this guy, you know, it's so funny. The leader, I guess the guy that supposedly invented Quackwatch, or I don't know what you call it, created Quackwatch. He's supposedly the psychiatrist who has numerous amounts of awards and stuff. But you know, people that are put and feels the need to debunk doctors that are curing cancer. If God forbid, if I were diagnosed with cancer, I don't give a fuck how many awards or medals or pieces of paper you have saying that you're a good doctor. I'm gonna fucking listen to the guy that cured cancer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's bullshit. So, and then, you know, I read a statement, him saying like, well, I've been accused of, you know, being paid by the FDA, and that's preposterous. It's only preposterous because he says it's preposterous, and he doesn't really have any way of proving that he's not paid by the FDA, you know? So we have to just take his word for it because he's a doctor with all these fucking pieces of paper.
Well, scientists lie.
Mm-hmm. No.
I think the only thing to know is that doctors and scientists lie. Just like we've been saying, just like the priests, just like we know that priests lie. We know that businessmen lie. We know that priests lied for a long time about a lot of things. You know, many of us had to experience what priests lied to about, and, you know, the entire civilization hushed that up for 30, 40, 50, 150, 250, 300, 500, 600 years. You know, people in groups that have something to protect, especially in groups, you know, you got to remember that, who was it who said, it will be seen that people tend to go mad in groups and only regain their sanity one at a time. I say slowly and one at a time. And, you know, and through a great deal of reading and learning and thinking and debating and arguing. But scientists lie, and I think until the public at large has an understanding that that's okay to admit, they're paid by the same petrochemical oligarchy that pays the Bush family and the Clinton family, and any other, and the Obama family. We know that all these guys lie. They serve a powerful master.
Yeah.
And when you serve a powerful master, you can't leave room for many questions. Imagine if we woke up tomorrow, all of us woke up tomorrow, and we all said, let's ask a question about the way we're living. Now, I drive this car, and there are, 7 gallons of oil in each of these tires, 7 to 10, and 42 barrels, 20-something to 40-something barrels of oil in the production of the car itself. Well, that's a lot, and do we get that back? No, we don't get that back. Okay, so where did that come from? Oh, the Middle East. It came from the Middle East. Well, we killed a lot of people to get that oil. Maybe I shouldn't drive this car. Well, how will I live if I don't drive this car? How will I go to the grocery store and get my food? And as soon as you start walking down this path, the entire thing that we call 21st century, late 20th century Western civilization begins to look like a charade. I almost said charade. I almost became English. It begins to look like a farce.
Right.
And if you wake up and it begins to look like a farce, you must say to yourself, shit, this can't last. If this, we haven't had this oil forever. This is very recent. And then the panic ensues. And that's what we're up against. That panic of what happens when this little bubble, petroleum bubble world is over.
Yeah. Yeah, and all this, I mean, going back to all the technology too, I mean, all this stuff is going to disappear at some point. I just can't foresee it lasting forever, and us being able to just use these things all the time and just have all these devices and everything, just the way that it's incrementally destroying us through, you know, all these things. I mean,
oh my God, April, you're anti-science. How dare you say that?
Right. I'm like against progress or against technology or something like that, you know, because that's the other thing too. Well, you're afraid of progress, you know. You want us to all go back and live in a cave. No, I don't.
No, you just want us all to live, you know, because.
I just want you to realize that it can't last forever. You know, these things are all, as Liam's pointing out, this is all trickled down from the petrochemical industry or this petrol oil. So when this runs out, when we have no more, it's going to go away. You know, maybe not all at once, but it'll start to incrementally, these things will start to disappear. You know, I mean, wait, you think you're always going to have an iPad? I mean, you're always going to have these things around you? I mean, I was telling my family.
That's what people think. You know?
Well, I was telling my family because, you know, they're at the school and stuff. We were working on teaching my son how to communicate through an iPad as an augmentative device, assistive technology. And I said, well, I'm not going to be dependent on that because I want him to learn sign language as well, because all this stuff could disappear one day, and he needs to be able to know how to do things without that he doesn't have to be dependent on some piece of technology. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. Like, well, what? What do you mean? Well, yeah. What if he doesn't have an iPad? What if this doesn't exist in 10 years? You know? And they're like, what? I'm like, well, he's still going to have his hands. I would hope. If he can't, you know, if his motor functions just won't get to the place where his voice, you know, if the apraxia of speech is so profound that he is unable to use his tongue in the way, but he can use his hands. And that's a form of communication. A lot of people, you know, who are deaf use their hands. It's been used, practiced for a long time, and it's useful, and you'll always have that with you. You don't have to worry about being dependent on some form of technology. So, and he seems to take to it better too, to be honest. He just seems to like to use his hands better.
That makes sense.
There's a better flow too with me when I write. I feel even before I write stuff on the computer, I feel like there's just a better connection with my brain and my mind when I have to physically write it with my hands. I usually do typing for editing, but when I'm trying to think of some ideas, you know, I like writing physically. You know,
that's because there's a reason for that, because writing actually increases your brain function. And penmanship and all those things are not being taught in school anymore because of these computers and these devices. They're moving towards that. But that actually, writing and actually does stimulate your brain. Like what you're describing is, I mean, that's true for everybody. But you know, and then back to the empathy thing. I mean, if you take, for example, that verbal communication is only 20% of our total communication, you have a whole 80% that's nonverbal. Well, are you able to communicate nonverbally if you're looking on a computer screen, or if you're looking on a tablet, or you're looking on a cell phone? No, because you're taking up all of that. You know, all your energy and everything is going into this, but what's coming out is only verbal communication. So a whole 80%. But if you're using your hands or you're using your mouth, and you can use those other things simultaneously, you don't have to give up that nonverbal communication. And that's such an important aspect. And it's very, not just with, I mean, definitely in, you know, in our world, and when you're dealing with education for autism, they tend to lean towards the verbal and forget about the nonverbal, which is far more important in a lot of ways. And you learn that developmentally first But even in the general public, like I'm saying, they're not even teaching writing anymore. They're not focusing at all on any of this kind of nonverbal communication. It's so important. And then what we have is this generation of people that don't have empathy.
We do have a generation without empathy. It's shocking to me. I noticed it first going on 10 years ago when I was writing at GNN, which stood for Guerrilla News Network. Gesundheit. And these people, I met the same crowd that I'm dealing with, unfortunately, now. I don't like to deal with them. It's pointless. But I'd never known people to be so crass and just so inhuman. I wondered, like, how they could say certain things to each other. It's like they didn't feel anything. Nobody was a person to them. And you can look back in history and see the same thing. You have it in the Nazis. Right? Yeah. You have it in when you dehumanize. So I'm wondering when people who disagreed with essentially petrochemical engineering became Jews to these people in the worst sense. When did that happen? Why should we believe? I mean, the Nazis, by the way, were the people who did this petrochemical engineering and made it such a dangerous thing for so many, and used people in terrible experiments. Used people in terrible experiments that were then found to be against the law, but then became de rigueur. The kind of thing that we now fund. It's exactly the thing that we fund over here now. So we went from condemning it to embracing it, and again, my thesis is that this is the result of living in the petroleum age, and that's what we are. That's what we are. We can't get around it. We live in the petroleum age, and as long as people have this magical power called oil, they're going to defend it. And I wonder what made them burn people during the 1400s, 1500s, or stone them, or drown them, or bind them and torture them. What made people do that when they were challenging the power of the church? Because it's the same question.
Right, sort of a propaganda that would make a certain group of people seem like they are not human. Like, slavery in this country. I mean, that was the propaganda that was used was to, say that, black people were less than human because they were overly sexual, and the men would rape your white women. They would rape your wives if they were let loose and things like that, in order to get people to kind of believe it. But really what they were trying to do was just use them for their free labor. Yeah. that was the point of it, because
But that's with any slavery, not just African American slavery. You have to dehumanize the person in order to justify your means.
Right. But it's always, as you're saying, it's the oil. But at that time, in this country, what had happened was there was sort of a questioning of this policy, of this slavery policy around the time of the American Revolution, because some people were actually correlating with, well, we're kind of hypocritical if we keep slavery around when we're actually saying we want a revolution for our freedom. What about these people? They're not free. And so what stopped that from continuing, and what stopped the slaves from being freed, was the invention of the cotton gin. So then they said, oh, well, now we can mass produce cotton and then ship it overseas and make a bunch of money. So let's forget that. Let's not go in that direction anymore because it doesn't serve us financially. So it's always something along those lines. I was,
not because it's so nice, right?
No, it's never right. It's a business agreement. Even freeing the slaves. I mean, that was a business agreement. That had to do with not wanting to compete with the South, and there are all kinds of reasons, but there's usually something financially. Someone is gaining financially. It's not usually out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah.
But right.
As they tell us in the history books, right?
Right. I mean, it's a nice story. So but it's not a truthful one, and so I guess wondering what do certain people want to kind of crave or are interested in the truth versus wanting to just believe the lie. I don't really know. I can't really pin it to anything.
But they don't think they're believing a lie. I think it's more like it's the thing that you touched on about the insecurity thing. The insecurity, I think that is a really good observation, because this is what you see when you see people in school that, kids and stuff, they're making fun of people. You hear your parents say stuff like, oh, they're just making fun of you because, they don't feel good about themselves. Remember hearing that shit when you were growing up, and you're like, whatever, like, you're a kid, you don't believe it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, but it's true. It's so true. But that's what they don't feel good about themselves. Obviously, if you have the need to make fun of other people, how happy are you really,
Right. Yeah. Right, and then these personal attacks that come in about, or the Wakefield effect, is when they come after a person rather than actually looking at the person's research.
Yeah.
They attack him personally.
Well, yeah, even, I remember Andrew Wakefield was even saying that his doctor approached him and was outraged about his research, and he was like, did you even read my paper? And the guy was like, well, I don't need to. How are you going to attack somebody on their work and you didn't even read what their work is about? How do you even, as a doctor, that's disgraceful. How do you even get to that point? You know?
Well, the sad thing about that is that his research is actually really, really good, and he had we were talking about before about the leaky gut and things, and I was telling you how autism is correlated to this gastrointestinal immune system dysfunction and, caused by this leaky gut and all that. A lot of his findings where they released to the public would have been really, really helpful for people to know that, and even not only in preventing autism by having people question the vaccine policy, but also about how they could recover through the use of diet and through the use of, anti-inflammatories, and things like that to try and reduce the inflammation in the gut. But all that was covered up. And but his research,
that's why it was covered up. You hit it on.
But his research is actually. But that's what's sad about it, is that his research was actually really good, because he was helping people. He was working. He had a practice as well where he was actually helping people that were through this, and that's what prompted him to do this study. So it's sad and pathetic that, but then because they can go after him personally, but they can't, because they can't actually go after his research, because his research was good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a clue there too. If they attack you personally, then you know that they can't go after your research. These people that claim to be so pro science and stuff, but then they get to a point where they start attacking you personally and lying about you and spreading rumors about you as if they're fucking little petty children in school. Then that your research, like you've already won. It's as painful as it may be, as annoying and disturbing as it may be, you've already won, because they're going after you, not what you're, so they're out of fuel.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Out of fuel. So what do you think, Liam? You still with us?
Oh, I'm with you. Let's talk about sex, drugs, and permaculture.
Let's do.
Let's lighten the mood.
Let's do it. I agree. So Sex, Drugs, and Permaculture is the new show. And any idea when this is going to start up?
Yeah, in mid-February I guess, if the world keeps turning. And wow, have you been reading Fukushima news?
No.
Yeah, I do. Nobody seems to be paying attention. Here, let's see if I can find this. Japan nuclear experts. Footage shows major problem in Fukushima unit number 1, cesium release, to continue for next 5 decades. Now, remember when 5 decades? That's the release. The half-life of this stuff is, what is cesium? 730 or 90? It's strontium 90? Well, somebody will write in with the right answer. 37?
I don't know. You're a genius. I'm not.
Yeah, whatever. So you can just look it up. What's the half-life of cesium-137? And all the other radioactive elements that get made in the thing. So they're now saying, who's saying this? Zengo Aizawa, TEPCO VP, even if we found out where the water is coming from, the question is how to stop it. I think it will be difficult, but we have no other choice, and if we fail that, it would be miserable. We just have to succeed somehow. Well, those are brave words. So we're, this thing goes on and on and on. And I guess I was saying, we were all saying before that scientists lie. And do we have a more blistering example that scientists lie than this total disaster that people don't want to talk about?
I mean, there
Nuclear
are many,
power?
but yeah.
Is there a better example of the short-sightedness of what we call science, which I call, energy slavery, than this? What else is there to prove? I mean, if we're not relocalizing and figuring out how to grow food, and essentially disconnecting a little bit from this internet machine and disconnecting from this way of life, finding out who our neighbors are, figuring out where we can get food and water from our local environment. What are we doing? Because we know this can't last. Japan is now, I think, clearly going to be a fallen state. I don't know who can really argue that
all of Japan, or just I'm not being a smartass.
No. Well, at least central. I mean, Tokyo is the major population belt, and then Hiroshima and the southern islands are somewhat are populated. The northern less so, but it's a blow to central Honshu, which is where Tokyo, the big island that Tokyo's on. And I don't think that you can have a constant release of radioactive material without evacuating people or without people eventually getting sick or running away. So what's next? I mean, what's next? How do we really have this battle? Or do they battle even more when they're losing? Do they get more vicious when they're... Why do they think that they're losing and we're not? We're all losing. Everybody loses.
Because they're lunatics. They kind of are. I mean, I know I'm being trying to be a little witty, but they are. They're not thinking rationally. They're lunatics.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Yeah, they're just in denial, I guess, about what, things that are going on. It's, I don't know. I don't know how they think that. You would have to not be paying attention or not notice or not, I don't know. Lunatics, I guess. Crazy, just not living in reality.
Yeah, well, nuclear denialists forgot to remember that we're not that clever, We're not that scientific, whatever that means to people. We're not, we're a messy little monkey species.
Right.
Storytelling ape, a highly, a social, highly sexual, tool-making, storytelling, artistic, musical species that, used to live in tribes and raise children in groups, not throwing all of that burden onto one little nuclear group's shoulders. Not just one or two people had to be responsible for all of that. I don't know why we've just forgotten that. We have a limit as a species. We are limited. The scientific elite types who believe because they grew up with the power of petroleum, which is essentially it can create anything that you want or that you think you want. It can make metal 20 tons, 30, 40, 50 tons of metal fly through the air. It can make plastic come alive with light and color and noise and sound, just like these computers. It's magic from a medieval point of view. So oil is magic. It's done magic. The energy released from oil has been magic, and it's been a disaster. And people just can't see that. If you've grown up with it, it's just normal. So everything that was normal and these scientists should really take an interest in the long normal was 98% or whatever of the human existence over a couple 100,000 years, and this 10,000 year period's tiny, or 95%. This 10,000 year period is very, very short, and it's been a struggle. And then the last blip, the last 150 years, it's not even a percentage point. It's nothing. Why don't they go, we can't? Why should we be able to handle nuclear power? Well, because for 40 years for 40 years, Scotchgard has protected carpets, so we should be able to handle nuclear power. Really? Because we made crap out of oil?
Yeah.
I lost the audience.
It's just very depressing because I really don't know what to do, and I wish I just, I think I sent this to you, I don't know if you read it, but it was news report in Peru that dolphins and sea turtles have washed up on the shore dead. And there's scientists don't know what the problem is. Really? They don't fucking know? Really? They know. They just don't want to admit it. I'm thinking it has to be Fukushima.
Yeah, there's a possibility. I'd consider it a strong possibility that a lot of what's going on the West Coast has to do with very strong radioactive materials leaking out of there, but people want to deny it. You can deny it all you want. If you take a wait-and-see attitude, I guess we'll see. And,
right.
But there's no waiting. I mean, this thing's leaking every day.
Have you done any research on what they can shut it down, right? It'd take how long? They can't shut nuclear power plants down.
Well, you can't shut down an out-of-control fission. Well, you could bury an out-of-control radioactive fission, but there's no switch to turn in the rods that have already begun to fission.
Hello?
You have to bury it in boron. Right now they're soaking it in water to reduce the heat so the reaction isn't as hot and doesn't reach a criticality is the word they use. I don't know why they haven't buried it all in boron, but it's in the groundwater. I don't really know what the answer is. I mean, it might be bleak, it could be bleak. Nobody can really predict. It could be an ongoing sort of ulcer that wipes out a lot slowly. There are buildings stuffed with nuclear material, and if they topple, we'll have a different kind of emergency. I don't know. And all of this stuff.
You can't drop it into. Go on.
Just all of this hatred for, stuff that, these guys don't bother to figure it out. They post NIH, government documents. Well, this is why. Really? Do the critical thinking. When governments lie. Even Amy Goodman knows that. Amy Goodman, who won't touch pharmaceutical stuff, knows that governments lie. I.F. Stone told her governments lie. So she gets that. So I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Damn, Liam, I thought you did.
Yeah.
What are we going to do now?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Relocalize.
Yeah,
Like
but where? I mean, I feel like everything. I mean, Fukushima is a huge problem, but it's not the only problem that we're facing in the world today. So it just depends on pick your battle. Where do you want to fight? Do you want to stay in California and deal with the oncoming radiation? Do you want to go to Florida and deal with the police state? We're being hit from all angles. So at this point, where do you go? There's really nowhere to run. Even people that think that they're going to escape the economic collapse, that some people say is coming, that they have the money to relocate out the country, they're only going to be able to do so for so long.
Yeah. Right. So yes, exactly. And it's hard to up and relocate, but I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I guess that's why it's hard for me, I haven't researched it as much or haven't looked into it as much because I just don't know what to do about it. You know what I mean? It's just not something, I don't know what to do about that information.
Nothing can be done.
Exactly.
Right.
So
you have to live and relocalize and have fun, make music, and I guess have a spiritual worldview that tells you that we'll have another chance.
Right.
I think we made a terrible mess of it all. I suppose I blame the discovery of oil not for our problems, but for the degree of our trouble. But there was always trouble. Human beings are a very strange species. The Crusades happened before oil. That was very strange.
A lot of strange, crazy, fucked up shit happened before oil.
Sending half of Europe down to the Middle East for what? To find where Jesus did or did not live, or the many Jesuses. There were many Jesuses, of course, but to find out there were many historical figures with the name Jesus, and then there were many people who fought the Roman Empire on those terms. So, what was that about? I mean, people believed it. People believe that people believe all kinds of things. And what can you do about it? Nothing. There's no answer to that. We're a storytelling creature. We like to tell stories.
Right. Yeah.
And on
we
that
like to
note,
tell stories, and we like to tell stories, and we like to develop our own tribes because we do feel this need to be understood. And so I think that's why one of the reasons we put our stories out there is because you want other people to come to you who will understand you. And it's like, people get upset that we're preaching to the choir, but who else are you gonna talk to? You're gonna talk to people who hate you and who won't listen to anything you say. It's like that movie with Michael Rupert, Collapse, and he tells the story about the different types of people that you have on the Titanic as it's going down. I mean, who are you going to talk to? The people who you have the one group that you say, well, the Titanic's going down, and they say, you're crazy, I'm going back to the bar. Okay, well, those people are no good to talk to. Then you have the other people who look at you, and then they're just deer in the headlights, and they won't do anything. And then you have the third group of people that say, okay, I hear what you're saying. What can I do about it? Is there anything I can do to help? Well, who are you going to talk to? You're going to talk to people who want to listen to what you have to say and maybe are willing to try and do something to help. And so maybe it's self-preservation or something. I don't know.
Or you can go to the people at the bar and get like a couple of drinks, and then you can go to the other people.
Right. That's true. You can go get a drink before you go.
I'm gonna get a low. Yeah. And then I'll go with the people that are actually gonna do something.
Right, because that's not bad, truthfully, to be told. If it's going to go down, it's going to go down, so you might as well have a few drinks before you,
exactly.
Have a good time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I like that. Okay, great. So, Liam, we're just about out of time here. We want to thank you for being on the show. You can find our friend Liam at liamchef.com, and you can find his book, Official Stories, on Amazon. It's on our store at truthertalk.com. And the new show is Sex, Drugs, and Permaculture, which will be airing mid-February. And what's the station again?
180 Radio. 180radio.com, 180radio.com, and we'll be up in mid-February.
Yeah, and Virstyne and I will be
regular absolutely.
Guests.
Both of you will be regular co-anchors and co-hosts, and you'll be on the show. It's going to be a radio show with video segments, so we'll be doing video, and we're talking sex, drugs, and permaculture. Sex, because sex is good for you, because we'll talk about natural remedies for actual STDs like chlamydia and gonorrhea. We'll talk about that kind of thing. We'll talk about the way that human beings pair and bond, and whether monogamy is a human trait, or whether everybody's monogamous, or whether most people are or aren't, based on, I guess, anthropological and tribal arguments. We'll talk about what else? We'll talk about the various ways that the church and the state has tried to manipulate and control people by making them afraid of sex. We'll talk about some of the mistakes that have been made, maybe like the birth control pill, what that drove people into, and how kind of yucky some of the 70s were because of a lack of understanding of relationships. Drugs, we'll talk about the petro drugs, the ones that we're not in favor of, and we'll talk about the plant drugs, the ones that we are in favor of. And permaculture is the way forward. I think that you get out there in the field and you dig a trench, or make a swale, or a berm, and these words you'll become familiar with, or a hugel mound, or a mound, a long raised bed out of earth and wood to grow things on. We'll talk about all that kind of stuff.
All right. And then you talk about how you can have sex on top of the permaculture?
And we'll have sex on top of the hugel mound. And
you can do sex and have drugs on top of the permaculture.
We will have drugs and sex in the permaculture.
All right.
Awesome. Well, love you, Liam. As always, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And so we're going to take a short break. When we get back, Virstyne and I will close out the show. So thanks, Liam. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Some parents really struggle with, like, all the other kids have the terrible things, so my kid has to. Yeah, let your kid go and be a better example to the kids. Just because the other stupid kids have phones doesn't mean that, okay, well, my kid has to be stupid, otherwise she'll feel weird.
Right.
I think these things are toxic. I don't, especially for kids. It's just this thing. It's bad, and they don't look at people when they talk to them, and they don't build empathy. Kids are mean, and it's because they're trying it out. They look at a kid and they go, "You're fat," and then they see the kid's face scrunch up and they go, "Ooh, that doesn't feel good to make a person do that."
Right.
But they got to start with doing the mean thing. But when they write "you're fat," then they just go, that was fun. I like that. So
That tasted good.
yeah, exactly. The thing is, you need to build an ability to just be yourself and not be doing something. That's what the phones
Yes.
are taking away.
Yes.
Is the ability to just sit there, like this. That's being a person, right?
Yes.
No one can. You gotta check, because underneath everything in your life, there's that thing, that empty, forever empty. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Yes,
Just
I know what you're
that
talking about.
knowledge that it's all for nothing and you're alone. It's down there. And sometimes when things clear away, you're not watching it, you're in your car, and you start going, oh, no, here it comes, that I'm alone, like it starts to visit on you. Just the sadness.
Yes.
Life is tremendously sad just by, being in it. And so you're driving, and then you go, that's why we text and drive. I look around, pretty much 100% of people driving are texting.
Yes.
And they're killing, everybody's murdering each other with their cars.
Yes.
But people are willing to risk taking a life and ruining their own because they don't want to be alone for a second. Because it's so hard. I was in my car one time, and a Bruce Springsteen song comes on. And it made me really sad. It's like Jungle, what's the one Jungle song?
Jungleland.
It's one where he goes, and he sounds far away. It's like,
That's half. Wait. That's half of them.
yeah, a lot of them.
No, he goes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really far away sounding.
Yeah.
Can you do it with the reverb? Can you do hey, hey? No, they're not doing it.
They're not. Try it.
So,
Like that?
yeah. Except for it was Springsteen. If it was you doing that, I would have been like, what the hell is that in my radio? It was Springsteen.
I did it just the same
Yes.
as Bruce.
And I heard it, and it gave me kind of like a fall back to school depression feeling. It made me really sad.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, I'm getting sad. I got to get the phone and write hi to like 50 people. And then, somebody cool writes back, and then somebody not as cool writes after, and I'm like, oh, you, I'm not going to... I got somebody better. But,
Hey, how come you didn't answer my text?
Speaking of which,
because he wrote first. That's right. So, anyway, I started to get that sad feeling, and I was reaching for the phone, and I said, you know what, don't. Just be sad. Just let the sadness, just stand in the way of it, and let it hit you like a truck. And I let it come, and Bruce, and I just started to feel, oh my God. And I pulled over, and I just cried like a bitch. I cried so much. And it was beautiful. It was like this beautiful, it's just this, sadness is poetic. You're lucky to live sad moments. And then I had happy feelings because when you let yourself feel sad,
yes,
your body has like antibodies. It has happiness that comes
rushing in
to meet the sadness. So I was grateful to feel sad, and then I met it with true, profound happiness. It was such a trip, And the thing is, because we don't want that first bit of sad, we push it away with like a little phone for the food, and you get a little kind of. You never feel completely sad or completely happy. You just feel kind of satisfied with your product.
Yes.
And then you die. So that's why I don't want to get a phone from my kids. That's what
I was on holiday with Sir Lawrence Olivier. We had decided that 9/11 was an intelligence operation. We'd all known about JFK. He had so many mistresses. The CIA shot him. Castro could never have done it. It was clear we had become realists, conspiracy realists. How would we let everyone know was the question. We decided to buy T-shirts that told the contents of our hearts and minds to the world. We went to shop.truthandtease.com. Even though the internet hadn't been invented at the time, we went to shop.truthandtease.com. There we purchased Conspiracy Realist t-shirts, one of a kind, sold only at shop.truthertees.com. 100% cotton in men's and women's fitted sizes. I won't tell you which one I'm wearing.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truther Talk and sticking with us. You can find us at truthertalk.com. So, hey, Virstyne, what's up?
I know, nothing. What's up with you?
Not a whole lot. We just talked to our friend Liam Skeef.
Lanky Shank?
And Lanky Shank. He was Lanky Skanky. He's a good guy. He's our friend. We've known him for a long time. And he's a very integral part of the development of this show and everything like that. So it was good to have him as always, and I'm sure he'll be back again. And his new show, Sex, Drugs, and Permaculture, which we are both part of, I guess. I mean, we haven't started it yet, so. But
supposedly we are part of, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, he says we're going to be part-time co-host on the show, or that's how he has us listed on the Facebook page. So we'll see what happens there, you know. And I've been on his show a few times. His show that he has right now, the Energy Show with Liam Schaff. I've been on that show a couple times, and yeah, you know, Robert Scott Bell. I think I've been on that show twice with Liam, and so yeah, I'm sure he'll have us on because he's that kind of guy. So anyway, yeah, it was interesting what we were talking about. We've had him on so many times that it's not really, when he comes on now, we don't really interview him. We just kind of
chat and
yeah, we just sort of right. Yeah, I'd say he and Sarah, our other friend that we have on all the time, when they come on, we kind of just, you know, it's like when they've been on so many times, you just don't, you don't interview them.
Yeah,
anymore.
it's like when a friend comes over to your house, like the first time, you know, you're like, oh, can I get you anything? And the second time, you know, oh, you know, yeah, feel free to do what you want. And then the third time, it's like, do whatever you want. Get your own water.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of like that.
Exactly.
So the what do you call it? The barriers just kind of fade. It's not as, you know, it's more comfortable.
Yeah.
To have on. So, but this whole empathy thing that, you know, we're talking about, I think, it's not talked about enough, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And it needs to be, especially in this movement, you know, because we do end up, fighting amongst each other a lot when we shouldn't be, when we should be, you know, pulling together. Just because you don't agree on one issue doesn't mean you need to fight or, you know, well, you know, maybe I should take that back, huh? It depends on the issue. That vaccinate, and I'm strongly opposed to vaccination, I'm still friends with them.
Right.
I don't write them off, even though I feel like some people have done the same to me. But maybe we both agree on 9/11.
But with regards to empathy, I don't necessarily know that depends on the issue. I think empathy is something that you should have whether or not, yeah. It doesn't matter what the issue is, basically. And but in regards to things like vaccination, you should be particularly more sensitive, given the fact that you're talking to people who have experienced with damage, or they've had, you know, friends or family members that have been hurt by vaccines.
Oh, but that didn't happen. You're imagining
and then,
there are no studies on that. I haven't read the study. Where's the study? You know.
Well, I mean, are your friends talking to you like that? Different, you know, people that you know personally, or are they saying those kinds of things, like, you know, about the study? And all that?
I've seen comments from people that I have gone to school with that haven't attacked me personally, but I don't think they know my story. They just know that I'm against vaccinations. So maybe if I were to be in a situation where I would end them face to face and tell them my personal story, maybe they would have more empathy. I don't know. I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I think a lot of those people too, they think they're doing the right thing. They think that they're saving the world from, you know, endless plagues and, you know, annihilation. That's what they have in their mind, you know.
Right.
That they're doing it. People that aren't doing that are just like, you know, getting their information from voodoo witch doctors and, you know, cauldrons, and they don't know what they're doing. They're uneducated. But that's also this whole fucking like imperialist attitude that, you know, the Western culture has been brainwashed with. Doesn't matter what race you are, but it's more of a Western culture thing too.
Right.
Because even I thought as a teacher in Taiwan, I thought I would come across more open-minded Western people, and they really weren't. They really still weren't really there to kind of immerse. A lot of the Western teachers that I was with, they weren't really there to immerse themselves in the culture for the sake of really trying to understand them, but for the point of trying to look more worldly. So they can be like, oh yeah, I went to this country and I've traveled to different countries and I'm so chic. But if somebody were to tell them about their culture and stuff, they wouldn't really give a fuck, or they didn't really try to learn the language or really try to see the culture from the point of view of the people in Taiwan or any place that they've traveled. They would go to the fancy hotel resorts and stuff, which is fine. I'm not knocking people that do that, but I think part of traveling, that can be such an eye-opener is basically talking to people and getting to know them and respecting them and not just trying to push your worldview onto them and saying mine is better because I'm more educated. Honestly, I think the Western world is more savage than has been more savage. They're the ones that are corporations and stuff, but they're cutting down trees and they're, making, fracking and messing up other people's lands and creating the GMOs and, all that stuff. They're the native people aren't doing that, so.
I guess when it comes to a person's consideration for others, that's kind of where we're at with this, whole empathy thing. So I don't know. So I guess what you're describing is that certain people who might travel and go to other countries and they consider themselves to be worldly, but then they really aren't putting themselves in the situation of the people.
Oh hell no, they're not. And they just want to be like, oh, I went to the Eiffel Tower. I'm so worldly, and they'll have a picture of them from the Eiffel Tower, but. If a French person came up to, or they complain the whole time about how rude French people are, or how, like the bad things, but, it's stupid. And maybe French people can be rude just like any other person, though. I wouldn't say all French people, are rude, but.
Yeah, well, when I was 20, I think I was 20, I went to Europe and we traveled through France, and there was a man we were on a train, and we arrived in Paris on a Friday night at 8 o'clock in the evening, and we were talking about how, oh no, we're arriving so late, we're not going to find a place to stay, and da-da-da-da-da. And this guy, he spoke English, and he was sitting in our cubicle or whatever it was, our cart train, and he heard us, and he said, well, you guys can stay at my house. And, at first we were like, oh, what? Like this guy, maybe who knows what he is. He didn't come across as a pervert, but we just,
yeah, it's so strange, yeah.
To be cautious, we were just kind of like, I don't know. And he's like, I have a wife and I have, 4 children, and so, there's.
What? That's so nice of him.
Mm-hmm. And sure enough, we stayed at his house. Yeah, he had like a really French name. He was like Jean Michel or something like. It was just, and he was real cute. He was a real sweet guy, and he was a journalist actually. He was he's not like a hard-hitting journalist. He wrote some kind of travel pieces, and he had gone somewhere and he'd been writing about this location that he stayed at, and he's like, I don't have a big place. I live in an apartment, but you guys can sleep in the living room.
Oh my God, that's like incredibly nice. And he has 4 children. What if you were crazy, and he's bringing you into his house?
Yeah, and so he just, he heard us, and he just heard our dilemma, and he understood our language, and so he was gracious enough to let us. And he's funny because he actually was the one to tell us that French people were rude.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was like, it's, because we were kind of like, oh, wow, French people, I guess French people aren't rude. And he was like, oh, no, they are. We were like,
maybe we have the same level of arrogance as Americans, and that's how we clash, maybe.
No, they don't like Americans, really, that much, because they think that we're, obnoxious. We're not very, chic. We're not very, sophisticated. And so, that's kind of the way that he said it. Those were his words. He's a Frenchman. I'm not trying to be generalizing French people, but that's what he said. He said they don't think that way. He goes, but honestly, they're rude. It's partly their culture, because he goes, they're rude to other French people too. It's not like it's just that they don't like Americans. He goes, but that is how they view Americans.
They're probably like what do you call it? Like they judge you. You're guilty before proven innocent kind of deal.
Well, yeah, and I guess too they want you, because he says that a lot of times what happens is they speak English because they actually learn it in school. It's part of their required learning. Yeah. And so most of them learn English, but then they act like they don't. And so if you try and speak to them in English, they'll ignore you. And he goes, but most of the time they understand you. And he goes, but they'll if you attempt to speak French, usually they'll talk to you, or they'll try and talk to you in English. They can tell if you're trying and you're giving an effort. So they kind of just want to see an effort out of you.
Yeah, and that's what I tell a lot of people too, because I feel like it's more of an olive branch too. Like when you go to somebody's country, to at least attempt to speak their language. Just carry around a Facebook. Just don't be like, hello, does anybody speak English? Why doesn't anybody speak English here? Why? Yeah. I've seen that. It's so embarrassing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you bump into someone on the train, you can say "pardon-moi." You don't have to just be like, "Excuse me." Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, a couple little phrases.
Thank you, hello, bonjour. Like
exactly.
Merci. Thank you. Something like that. I would imagine. Just to see. It's a respect thing. It's more of a respect thing, I feel too.
Right, and then so I guess it's. This correlates to what we were talking about with Liam, but I guess we were more focusing on the social networking aspect, but you could translate that to how people go into other countries or things like that. But we were talking about it in terms of in this social networking environment. A lot of people come into this level of rudeness because they feel that they're invisible, or that they feel that it's anonymous in a way, because even though you may have your name and your picture, they still have no way to really contact you.
Yeah, even if you're in a chat room or something, you can kind of be a jerk and then just and then leave when it suits you, or you can't be tracked.
Exactly. Right, but people talk to you in a manner like that was what Louis C.K. was saying, is that they'll say things like, "Oh, you're fat," and they don't have to see your reaction. So they don't mind if it hurts your feelings, because they're kind of just testing the waters, and little kids do that because they're testing the waters. But then and they also don't have to suffer the consequences, because not everybody's going to get sad. They might get pissed and they might go off on you. So you can hide like a little bitch. Like you're fat, bam, log out. Exactly. Yeah, it's funny. It's true. People can say such rude things, or just make asinine comments out of nowhere. And that's sort of what we were talking about with all this thing, because empathy is very important, and we can't, we have to use this tool, this technology responsibly.
It just empower us, because lack of empathy is disempowering.
It is disempowering, and we have to be responsible, because if you don't want to become a machine yourself, if you want to maintain your level of humanity, you can't allow these machines to take human elements away from you.
Yeah.
So if you think it's cool to insult people, or to give them a hard time just because you're bored, or because you're I don't know why.
I think a lot of it does have to do with low self-esteem, because I can't imagine people that are just outright mean to people have high self-esteem.
That's a good point, yeah.
As cheesy as it sounds, why are you going to be an asshole to somebody if you feel good about yourself, or if you're secure in yourself? You're going to do that if you're not.
Exactly.
Like we talked about the rooms that pop up that just make fun of people. Not try to get to understand them, but just like, oh, I'm gonna make a Facebook page against people who say chemtrails are real, and even instead of actually looking up in the sky, but why are they taking their time just to talk shit about people? That's what people do in high school. in junior high, man, even in college, well, life, you know, but I mean, you would think that once people became adults that they would have gone past that, but they don't, you know, some don't.
Well, it's certainly not in this environment, so we have to be mindful of that, and I hope that people take heed to these experiences because, you know, there are real people on the other end of these computers. They're not, you know, you know, we're all human beings, and when you attack somebody, and they get upset, don't be surprised because they're human beings, you know. They might just attack you back, so, and then you're going to get hurt and then, you know, start crying to your mama.
It's always the ones, too, that, like, you know, they come on and they're like, you know, they make some really smart or just very vindictive comment, and then you comment back, and they're like, I was just asking a question. Why are you being so mean to me? I was trying to be balanced and look at both sides of the story. You're so mean. I hate those people. Like, no, you're not. You weren't even listening to what I was trying to say. You just wanted to